As to access the data prior, you would have to go through an accident reconstruction firm. And if you've done that in the past, you're familiar with paying a retainer, hourly rates, travel, and it can get pretty expensive to just access the data in your vehicle or preserve it and see what happened in a case. So we started our company to offer it for flat rate fees across the Southeast United States and have recently expanded out to Texas in the last year and a half. We've done about 10,000 plus downloads since we started the company, and we have a certified team of technicians that travel throughout and do all the downloading. So on the road today, there are about 200 million vehicles that have the capability to record digital data events. And this information stored in the black box can tell us who, what, when, where, and how the accident happened. So this is great for determining liability, accident severity, and fraud. So over the course of this training, we're going to cover a couple things. What kinds of EDR data do we look for? What passenger and commercial motor vehicles have the capability to record and store EDR data? What type of data is saved? How long you have to get the data before it disappears from the vehicle? How do you access the data? And how this can be used in your case. Will?
So one of the important things to take away from this presentation is we're going to make you aware of what's in a vehicle, what's going on. But one of the biggest deals is there's all these acronyms, ECM, ACM, PCM. All of those are considered EDRs, which is an event data recorder. If you're ever sending a spoliation letter, preservation letter, or anything of that nature, because you're about to look into a case or may look into it later, you can say EDR. You don't have to know that it's a specific ACM or any of the acronyms. One thing to note is that GPS and video recording data related to an accident is considered EDR. It's in that blanket term, but it's probably worth mentioning if you're sending a spoliation letter to also say GPS and video recording equipment. We see cases every now and then where opposing sides kind of go back and forth on whether GPS and video was considered EDR. So if you go to send a spoliation letter, say EDR, you won't be wrong about any of that data recorded by the car, and just mention GPS and video recording equipment that may also be present. EDR is just a really good blanket term to use for anything that the car may have recorded in an accident.
So starting off with the passenger vehicles, there are a couple different types of data that can be collected. Your main one being the airbag control module or the black box, an infotainment system, a collision avoidance system, and then we can also download any dash cams or GPS devices that the driver may have installed in the vehicle. And so we're going to go through each one of these individually. And as Will just stated, an airbag control module has many different names. It can be called an EDR, black box, CDR, or an ACM. And the data from these modules are typically stored in the vehicle until the EDR itself is replaced. So if the airbags did not deploy during the accident and it happened 5 years ago, we could go download that vehicle and potentially still get data from 5 years ago. There could be multiple accidents recorded and saved on the vehicle. The only time you really have to worry about losing the data on a passenger vehicle is if the airbags deploy and they get repaired. So a new black box would be put in the vehicle. However, we do have the capability to download them in our office as well as on site of the vehicle. So if your vehicle is getting repaired, you just tell the shop to save that black box and we're able to download it offsite as well. So I mentioned that there's over 200 million vehicles on the road that have the capability to record and store black box data. As you can see here, going all the way back into the late 1995s, Ford, Lincoln, Chevrolet, GMC, Buick, they all are going to give you some sort of data going back that far. And then in 2012, there was a federal regulation that said all vehicles on the road had to record the data. So while most manufacturers had already started recording the data prior to then, in 2013, all vehicles on the road now have that pre-crash data. And so in passenger vehicles, you get 5 seconds of pre-crash data. And this gives you information like your speed and engine throttle, your braking and ABS activity, your impact severity, seatbelt status, and more. So we do have to have access to the vehicle to download the data. And this photograph is an example of us plugged in to the vehicle, retrieving it. But like I said, if the airbag's deployed and they're replacing them, that module can be removed and downloaded off-site. Data is locked whenever the airbags deploy, but even if they don't, if the impact severity was greater than 5 miles an hour delta V, it will take a snapshot of that accident and save it to the airbag control module. And here we have an example of the data that you would get from a passenger vehicle. So you can see that it has 5 seconds leading up to the accident, incremented out in half-second timeframes. So on pretty much every vehicle, you will get this information listed here: your timestamp with your speed, your accelerator, your service brake, your engine RPM, your maximum delta V, and even the seatbelt status of the driver and the passenger. And then other vehicles may also include information such as your ABS activity and your steering wheel degree angle. And so just to dive a little bit more into what this information looks like, you can see that 5 seconds before the impact, the driver was going 93 miles an hour with 100% accelerator pedal usage, and his brakes were not activated at all. And then leading up to it, 2 seconds before the impact, you can see, he's still going pretty fast at 67 miles an hour, but he did take his foot off of the gas pedal and activated the brakes 2 seconds before impact. And then at impact, they were going 62 miles an hour. So this information can just tell you, what you need to know about the case leading up to it.
So we talked about something a minute ago. It was saying there's delta V that's also contained in the data, with that speed and everything there. But what is delta V? It's a measure of your impact severity, and it's measured in miles an hour, but it's not truly the speed the vehicle's traveling at. It's the speed change of that vehicle within the first few milliseconds of an accident. So we've got a diagram here to kind of give you all a visualization of what's going on. We've got a black car that comes up to a stop sign and stops. They were paying attention, stopped for the stop sign. Blue car behind them, probably distracted, is going 20 miles an hour and runs into the back of that car. Assuming these vehicles are of equal weight, they're going to feel equal impact forces in the accident. So how fast is that black vehicle going to be going after the accident? With equal forces, they're both going to be pushed to 10 miles an hour, which would make this a 10 mile an hour delta V. They each had a 10 mile an hour speed change within the first few milliseconds of that accident. Now, looking at the delta V a little bit closer, a negative delta V means that vehicle slowed down by 10 miles an hour. A positive one means it sped up by 10 miles an hour. The black car increased its speed by 10 miles an hour. The blue vehicle slowed down by 10 miles an hour. So if you're ever looking at data that comes off of a vehicle and you're looking at it, this helps. We'll go a little deeper in a second, but you can look at that as the speed change that vehicle felt. So which impact happened first? I'm going to go ahead and tell you that this is the same vehicle with nearly identical front and rear impact forces. You don't have to answer, but just look at it for a second. If you guess the rear end impact, you'd be correct. This vehicle was the middle vehicle in a 3-car pileup. But without a download or without anything super substantive, it's hard to tell, if the middle vehicle ran into the person in front of them or was rear-ended and pushed into them. Now with a download, these vehicles are actually capable of recording multiple impacts. So with one download, I can tell you that this vehicle was rear-ended first and pushed into the vehicle in front of it. They're labeled first record, second record. And then in the boxes on the data below, you can actually see there's about a second offset. So it was hit from behind, pushed into the vehicle in front of it, and received nearly the same impact force, slowing down by around 12 miles an hour. Now, we just talked about delta V. The additional data point here is we can see tied to these records that it had a rear impact first and then a frontal impact second, because it sped up by 12 miles an hour and then slowed down by around 12 miles an hour. This just gives you all a good, a little bit more in depth into what comes off of a vehicle. And the data below is actually directly pulled from a download we've done. This is identical to a real case we had. And these downloads are incredibly good to figure out who started the chain in an accident. So how do we use this? We can use it to evaluate liability. We can see if someone was distracted. We can identify the speed of a vehicle. It will tell me exactly how fast someone was going leading up to an accident, how fast they were going at impact. Did they take any evasive maneuvers? Did they start braking, with appropriate time, and all kinds of other things. Also helps us establish that order of impact, which can be incredibly important in a 3-car plus pileup.
So at the beginning of the slide, we said there was 3 different types of data that can be collected from a passenger vehicle. And so the second type of data is an infotainment system. And this is generally saved on the vehicle for about 6 months of normal operation time. And then it starts overriding itself at that point. And so infotainment connects the occupants to the digital world, and it stores information about the driver to customize their experience. So if you've ever seen like a big touch screen in your car and your phone is either connected via Bluetooth or USB, it is actually recording and saving your phone usage activity to the vehicle, depending on the make and model of it. So not all vehicles are going to be able to have this capability. It really depends on the user activation, like OnStar sometimes, and the device make and model, because these systems are not made by the vehicle manufacturer, but a third party. And so to have the capability to download it, you need some third party creating the software to give us access to the vehicle. It's not something that is provided by the vehicle manufacturer itself. And so when you're looking at the compatibility of it, Ford and Lincoln is what we like to call our gold star standard. So from these vehicles, you're going to get more information about your driver and their driving history than you probably want to know sometimes. And then other vehicle make and models will have limited data. It's not going to be as detailed and as much, but a rule of thumb would be that Ford and Lincoln is your most commonly supported for this download. And so an infotainment download is not in place of an EDR download. It's completely separate, and you would have to do both of them to get all the data you're looking for in the accident. And so when the phone is connected to the vehicle, either by USB or Bluetooth, it is recording things such as the door open and closing of your driver and the passenger side, your GPS track logs showing your routes and your speeds with timestamps on those as well, the device connections, your call log, so timestamps for when a phone call was started and ended while connected to the vehicle, your contacts, browsing history. We could even tell if your driver was watching a YouTube video while they were operating the vehicle, as well as text messages. So when it comes to text messages, you'll get timestamps for SMS and iMessages, but you'll actually get the contents of the SMS messages as well stored on the vehicle. And so this chart is an example of the information pulled from an infotainment device. So you can see that you have the time and the date, as well as the time zone, the activity that was happening at that time. So whether they were shifting gears, connecting, disconnecting a device, opening or closing a door, as well as the exact GPS location coordinates of that event. And so how can we use this data? So it's really good for identifying excess speed because the speed of your insured vehicle is typically reported for this. It's great for recognizing fraudulent statements. Does the accident story align with what the infotainment data states? Because as we saw, this infotainment gives you exact GPS coordinates, time, and date stamps of the vehicle and where it traveled. So you could compare this data to the story that the client was told about what happened at the time of the accident. It could also help determine who was in the car if that's relevant to the case. As we saw, it shows door opening and closings of the passenger and the driver sides. So if they said they were in the car alone, but the data shows that the doors open and closed about the same time within a few seconds of each other, that would indicate someone else was in the vehicle. And then it's also great for helping to recognize driver negligence. Were they distracted on their phone at the time of the accident? So the third type of data that we can collect is a collision avoidance system, or a VCH download. So like infotainment was specific really to Ford and Lincoln's, you're going to get VCH downloads from newer Toyota and Lexus's 2016 and newer. So these vehicles actually have the capability to record and store 8 seconds of black and white video footage of accidents or potential accidents for 6 months of normal operator driving. So from the VCH system, you can get things like your steering wheel touch, adaptive cruise, lane centering, GPS positions, as well as low impact cases. So we do have a few examples of this. So as you can see, it is choppy black and white footage, but it does give a pretty good idea of what happened. So in this instance, our driver did have the right of way with a green light, and a vehicle turned on either a flashing yellow light or they had the red light and turned out in traffic in front of this vehicle. So it can be great for red light cases. But it's especially good for low or no impact cases. So if you hit a pedestrian, most of the time that impact is not going to be severe enough to trigger an EDR event. But obviously something happened. So as you can see, this driver was turning into her neighborhood like she probably does every day. But today there was a gardener that was in the road, and she was either not paying attention or just didn't see them and did end up hitting them. There was no black box event triggered for this impact, but the car was able to catch the video footage of it. And so this data can be great for helping determine, accident avoidance opportunities. Was the driver able to avoid the accident, or was it really unavoidable? It's great for smaller impacts like the pedestrians that don't get saved on the EDR events. And it does help also determine your driver awareness. So their history of automatic braking events, their history of steering wheel uses, and other assessments of driver awareness that can be used to determine effects on a case. And then the last thing is if your driver has a dash cam or GPS device in the vehicle, we are able to extract any data from those as well. And so this is something that we will do complimentary for any download that we go out and do. If we see something that can be downloaded externally like this, we will go ahead and download it and send that information to you. And so just a little bit on the GPS and why it's useful as well. So it can show you historical driving data. So you can see here is their route they were driving and their average speed along the route. So you can see if they were speeding, if they were, if it was a one time they were accelerating to pass, or if they were driving that fast on average throughout their trip. And so again, GPS and dash cam data can be great to help recognize fraudulent statements, to see if the timestamps and tracking match what the client says happened at the time of the accident.
So we just talked about passenger vehicles. I know there's a lot. We've got a lot more coming with commercial vehicles as well. And obviously, we're going to help answer some of y'all's more specific questions here at the end. The point on the commercial vehicles here is we're going to go over some of the best things to look for, and then we're going to go over some of the stuff that may potentially be in a truck so that, when you send those spoliation letters and when you do things like that, you're at least aware that there's potential for systems like these to be in the vehicle. So it's going to seem a little bit longer and drawn out, maybe a little confusing, but the big thing here is we're trying to let you know what is potentially in there and kind of what you can do with it. So as far as commercial vehicles, it's also called HVEDR, which is the same as that EDR statement we talked about earlier. It just means heavy vehicle. But you can refer to anything in a truck the same way as a passenger vehicle by calling it an EDR. It's that excellent blanket statement. Now, how these heavy trucks, dump trucks, school buses, semis, all that, how they're different is they actually quickly overwrite data. We talked about those passenger vehicles containing a lot of that data for a long time. These trucks, it's pretty important to image them quickly after an accident because most of their data is actually going to be pretty easily overwritten by taking 2 or 3 trips down the road. So as far as commercial vehicle support, you can see here there's a chart on the left. Generally, anything 2000 or newer is probably going to have data, but it all really depends on the engine that is in the truck. It doesn't matter if it's a Freightliner truck or an international truck. There's plenty of Volvos on the road that actually have an international engine or a Cummins engine because they're kind of an amalgamation. They're not as standardized. Ford makes the motors for the Ford cars, but International doesn't always make the engines in their international trucks. So it's a little bit more weedy. Now, this data is not triggered by an impact the way a passenger vehicle is. This data, the hard brake and sudden decel events tend to be triggered by slowing down by 7 to 10 miles an hour a second. Now, you don't have to be braking to have a hard brake event. It's actually just recording the speed of the vehicle. And if they ran off the road and went and hit a ditch and it slowed them down quick, that's actually going to record an event, whether or not that driver applied any brakes. But your hard brake and sudden decel events are going to be your best bet for getting about a minute to a minute and a half of speed data. So you can actually evaluate for a much longer period how that truck was being operated. Last stops are useful as well. Those are the easiest to overwrite because all that truck has to do is get over about 5 miles an hour at the tow lot to start overwriting it. And so again, it's important to get this data as quickly as possible or keep that vehicle held until you can inspect it. Engine faults can be an important part. Typically, if a truck loses air pressure or something like that, it's going to take a single line screenshot telling you the speed of the vehicle at the time of air loss or at the time, the coolant, pressure got low and things like that. So on the right, we've got a sudden deceleration report. There's graphs for it, and there's actually just kind of data tables. But typically for most of them, you're going to get at least 45 seconds, some of them a good bit more, but it's going to give you the speed, brake status, engine speed, your clutch status. It's going to tell you how that vehicle is being operated. And then it'll actually give you some electronic driving logs as well, which are going to display some of the same data, but may format it a little differently. So it may be a little bit easier to glean what happened. But these trucks don't tend to record your seatbelt status or your impact delta V the same way a passenger vehicle does, because a 50,000-pound truck hitting a Camry is not going to feel the same impact. And so it's delta V data just wouldn't be as useful because it'd be very difficult to tell exactly what was going on based on the weight of the vehicle. So how do we use that initial set of EDR data? Same as with the passenger vehicle, you can help evaluate the liability. You can help resolve it. You can see if they were speeding. You can see if they took any avoidance measures. And it's really helpful to figure out that it can help figure out the order of impacts. You can help see what that truck was doing. Did it start braking and then it had a significant slowdown after it started braking? Did it slow down quickly before the trigger point? And then it's going to give you some driver logs where was the driver operating for 16 hours running down the road, which is way over what they're supposed to be driving in a day. Then we got fleet tracking systems. These tend to not, they can be downloadable as a vehicle. It just kind of depends. There's a ton of different versions of it. There's new mandates coming out all the time that are talking about drivers can no longer be writing down on a pad and paper when they left, X location going to Y location. So more and more of that is becoming electronic. And what that means is you've got a better idea of the truck and you're not just having to go find a driver's hand note log somewhere in the truck to figure out exactly what they were doing. Here's just kind of a clip of one of the types of fleet tracking system. Obviously, we can see how often this one was updating. This one's, about every 5 seconds to a second, depending on what's going on. But it can take additional events, when it started, when it stopped, when it started moving, give you an exact GPS coordinate, and then it'll give you additional speed. And this data can actually go back sometimes weeks or months in comparison to the hard brake and sudden decel events we talked about, which are a minute and a half. This can actually go back fairly far and can help answer other questions you might have about the case. So again, recognizing, fraudulent statements and things, when did they pick up and start moving the vehicle? You can see if, maybe they were kind of breezing through stop signs, running down the road, identify your excess speed. And then you can also see the truck path. Do the trucker statements align with where they said they were? Were they in the wrong area? Why were they going there? And then we got some collision avoidance systems in trucks. You don't see these quite as often, but they can be really useful. They're a little bit more complicated to go through. We're going to give you just a little example on them, just so you kind of can evaluate what's out there. Typically, it's going to be some BORAD data that'll give you things. It'll tell you when the truck detected a potential problem. It's actually using radar most of the time to detect vehicles in front of it, and tell you how quick the truck was going, how quick the other object was moving, how fast was the approach, and then where a potential impact was. And so in line with that, there's integrated collision systems that so like Detroit's Assurance actually has some similar to the Toyota we talked about previously. Will actually record video native with a natively installed system. There's a good couple of different ones, but it's really interesting. So here's a video that came directly off of the truck. This isn't an actual impact, but because it doesn't record on an impact, it actually sensed that there might have been a potential collision here because they had to hard brake running up to this car. Now, this is what a hard brake in general looks like when those hard brake sudden decel reports we were talking about. And it's why it's so easy for those to be overridden, because there was no accident here. This is fairly normal braking. They had to get on the brakes a little bit late, but the vehicle both sensed through radar and through the ECM, the hard brake sudden decel events we talked about. This would probably be an event that it stored and would overwrite one of the previous events. So it's why it's important to keep your truck off the road. Now, this is a Lytx drive cam. Lytx drive cams are pretty darn common, or similar systems are as well, where they're actually a cloud-based recording dash cam and GPS with a driver-facing camera. Now, these can't be downloaded on site, but someone like Collision Data, if we go out to the vehicle, we're going to see it. We're going to take a picture of the serial number, of the FCID number and all that, and let our client know that, hey, there is a dash cam in here. It's not accessible on site, but this is uploaded to the fleet's cloud system, and you need to send a spoliation letter about this. You may have already said it, you may have not, but we're going to make you aware that there is video from this accident. Lytx dash cams are very good about recording on proximity, and they can record actually many events and just store them right in the cloud that the fleet has access to. So how are we using this? Much like the others, it just helps us understand specific questions on a case. There's a million variables going on in any accident. But again, it helps us evaluate that liability, helps us see if they took any avoidance. Video of the driver is great, especially if there's questions of if they were on their phone or not. And these will actually record those hard brake or sudden decel events with somewhat similar data, even if the truck didn't catch one. That camera actually knows something's going on, even if the truck decided it wasn't worth recording. And that, just helps us determine driver awareness like we talked about with the phone. So dash camera, GPS devices, we just talked about the lytics. This is very similar to how the dash cams and GPSs in the passenger vehicles we talked about. We're going to download anything that you can get your hands on. If it is downloadable at the vehicle, we're going to plug into it, capture that data, and report it back to you. But some of those are cloud-based and may not be accessible, but much like the Garmin's, we're able to, you can take and map that on Google Earth very easily and see their average speed and running time and all that. Again, helps us recognize fraudulent statements. GPS data with timestamps can tell you a lot about a case, and it helps us identify that truck. So even if that data got overridden, this hard brake, sudden decels, say the truck's a dud because they put it back in service right after the accident, it's been running for a month, those Garmin's are actually going to store data for roughly 6 months of time, and you can actually go back to the date of an accident, the scene of an accident, looking at the GPS coordinates directly and tie in the speed and other data points leading up to it. So this is an EDR data overview. These are all the things we talked about. Everything on this page can be called an EDR. We talked about the spoliation letter, probably worth mentioning, dash camera, GPS individually, but all of these do fall under an event data recorder. It is something in the vehicle that records event data. And it's an incredible tool for evaluating what happened in an accident, helping you understand it. We all know that sometimes statements from anybody in an accident are not always correct. Sometimes they are, but more often than not, there's some questions left. And all of these help you get a better understanding of the accident you're looking at.
So just a little overview of what we just covered. Our goal is to make accessing and preserving the data fast, easy, and affordable. So when you submit an assignment, we make it pretty simple. You go to our website, www.collisiondata.com, and there'll be a submit assignment button on the homepage. From there, it'll prompt you to fill in all of your vehicle information, where it's located at, and then if you have a file or client associated with it, we do ask you enter that, so that way with the correspondence back and forth, it's easy to assign that to a case. You get the original download files, you get your interior and exterior photo documentation, our flat rate pricing throughout our standard territory coverage shown here, and our trained EDR technicians that are up to date on the licensing. And so one thing to note with this that we get asked a lot is, are you an expert witness when it comes to testifying to the results or the findings of this data? And the answer to that is no. The reason we're able to keep our pricing so affordable is we are not an expert witness for that. We're happy to testify to the chain of custody of retrieving the data, that we were, licensed and up to date on that, and that it was not tampered with. And when you receive your data report, if you have questions on it or need help reading it, we're always happy to review the data with you and let you know what happened, but it's not something we can testify to the findings of. But if you get to the point in your case where you need an expert, and you do end up going the full accident reconstruction route, you can just send them the original download files from this and say, here's the download report. Don't charge me to do it again when you take over the case. And so this is just a little example of the photo sequence that we do when we go out there. However, if there's ever anything specific you want photographed, just let us know on the assignment submission form, and we will make sure to take extra photographs of that for you. And so our standard response time and turnaround on this is once the assignment is submitted, it's about 2 to 5 business days for us to get it on the schedule and get someone sent out to it. If you need it quicker than that, we do rush jobs, but you need to notate that so someone can call you about it. And then once we get out there, it's another 2 to 3 business days afterwards to get the report and the photographs in your inbox via a Dropbox link. And so here on the screen is our fee schedule. So for the passenger vehicles, for a typical EDR data imaging, it's going to be $500 flat. There's no additional or hidden fees. $500 to go out and photograph and download your vehicle. The specialty vehicles would be your exotic cars, and then as well as Teslas, due to the amount of time it takes to download those and the licensing required from Tesla. Those are set at a higher rate. And then the VCH vehicle control history is going to be $1,000 to get the EDR data imaging and the camera footage from the car. So it's not $1,000 plus the $500 for the EDR imaging. It's $1,000 for both, but you need the EDR data to get the VCH data because they go hand in hand together. For commercial motor vehicles, $1,500 flat again to go out and retrieve that. And then lastly, the infotainment and telematics, that is $1,500 for the download. It does not include the EDR data imaging. So if you wanted both, it would be $2,000 to get both of those downloads. We do appreciate y'all's time and sticking with us to learn a little bit more about EDR and who we are and what we do. I know this is with the Paralegal Association, so if you thought this presentation would be beneficial for your individual firms you work at, we are happy to come either do in person, like a lunch and learn, or do a Zoom meeting just like this one for you all. And we'll take any questions you might have.
One thing to note real quick is all of our prices are flat rate. Anywhere in that covered territory, that includes travel, includes time at the vehicle. We find it's easier to let you know exactly what you're getting into with a case prior. And that vehicle control history up here with Toyota and Lexus that's the video we talked about and the additional data that comes with it. There's some additional EDR data. You don't have to get that for a Toyota. If you send us a Toyota job, we go out to a Toyota and we notice that it is supported for that video footage and all that. We're actually probably going to give you a call on site and let you know and ask if you would like that additionally. So we're pretty good about letting you know, hey, there's additional data in this car. Do you want to do that? Do you want to not? What are you looking for in the case?
I have a question.
What's that?
What about vehicles that have been converted over? So like, there's a paraplegic and now he has a vehicle that's being controlled by his hand, at the top, and he was involved in an incident where he was not able to stop the vehicle. So there may have been a defect in the control or the acceleration. Do you guys look at vehicles like that?
Yes. So the data that comes off of that vehicle, unless it is a very, very in-depth, complete change of the vehicle, it's actually still going to retain the same airbag modules, the same EDR data there. Now, as far as determining if those modifications may have contributed to the accident, we can certainly help you look at that and evaluate if that might have been a potential issue. Looking at it with a download and things. And we could also tell you, if you call us before a case, you're saying, hey, this might be a potential problem, but we don't have a download yet or something. We can probably, if we know the modifications of the vehicle, we can help you determine if that is a, I don't want to say valid concern, but if it's likely that contributed to the accident. We don't go testify that this individually caused the accident. We are an absolute fraction of the cost because we do volume on these. We're all certified. These are the same files that a reconstruction firm would use. And we work closely with them all the time. Probably 15% of our business is for reconstruction, smaller reconstruction firms. But so we can help you evaluate that, but we are not going to testify that the wheelchair access control arm was the thing that caused the accident. But I can certainly help you evaluate if that is if that was a concern from the accident, if that makes any sense.
Thank you.
Okay, I have a question as well. Have you ever had any of the information disputed as far as like saying that it's fallible or false, even though you're saying that this came from the black box? Have you ever had anyone dispute that?
We have, so we have more, yes, in certain scenarios we get deposed every now and then about it, but part of that with the photo documentation, with the download procedure, and with the standard thing, we do have our testimony taken every now and then on that to tie the vehicle to the records we retrieve. But we've never had an issue with, we take photographs of the VIN, we take photographs of the airbag control module at the scene, we take photographs. We have never had a big issue with that. We've been asked the question plenty, but we've never had a case devolve into, well, this isn't the airbag control module from this vehicle, because what you do is you document exactly what you're doing the entire time. And then, if asked, you tell them your standard procedure, the industry standard procedure. We have not had a case that devolved because of that.
And the download reports also have safeguards in place that allow you to know if the data was tampered with or not. And I'll let Will jump in on that, but he knows a little bit more than I do. But it is very difficult to tamper with and change the data from the report.
So on your passenger vehicles, there's something called hexadecimal data. If you scroll to the end of a download file, you'll see a bunch of ones and zeros. No one independent of Bosch, who tends to manufacture the airbag control modules, and then the manufacturer can translate any of that data. If you were to use a PDF editor to go in and change something in a download file, that would be easily revealed through a CDRX file, which is not the typical file. It gets translated to a PDF. But there are plenty of safeguards in place to avoid tampering with that would be apparent if someone went and did that. So it is very difficult to get away with, say opposing getting a download, then messing with it and reporting it that way. It would be very difficult to get away with that. So yeah, it's indexed by that hexadecimal data at the end that we can't translate. And if you change something, that data would change, but you don't know how to change it.
Okay.
So that would come out.
I have a question.
Oh, go ahead.
Yes, ma'am.
What, with you saying that you're not an expert, and you don't testify as an expert, but you do all these downloads, what is I'm trying to figure out how to word my question. What is the benefit of using you over a licensed expert like Bloomberg? Or I mean, what would be the benefits to us if you can't take it all the way through? Or maybe I'm misunderstood.
No, that's fine. So we are experts in the retrieval and preservation of data. We're as qualified as anyone to pull that data, collect it, and report it back to you. You are going to be, so for, let's take a passenger vehicle, that top number, $500 for, say, a 2013 Honda. The 2013 Honda doesn't have anything additional in it other than that standard airbag control module, which is an EDR download. You're going to pay an accident reconstruction team somewhere between $3 to $7 grand to go out there and inspect the vehicle and download it. You don't know if the case is good. You don't know if what's going on with the case. You're going to pay $5 grand when you could pay $500 to know what's going on with the case. And you haven't ruined anything by using us, because the download fee for an expert tends to be about the same price for us to travel to it, download it, send you photographs, and report it back. It lets you know what's going on with a case for the absolute minimal cost. And you haven't spoiled or gotten rid of anything.
So if it turns out to be something where we need expert, we need to bring it on, or bring an expert on, are they able to use your information, or would they have to re-download everything?
Yes. So they can actually use the exact same data we pulled. It is going to be identical. If they do a download on that 2013 Honda, that is going to be the same data they pull. We are certified in that. We hand it over to accident reconstruction all the time. If you get a case that you think is worth, you don't know what it's worth, but you get it in and you decide, holy cow, this is a $10 million potential case. We need to go full bore, do everything in the world. You can hand that data right to your reconstruction expert. And the reconstruction people tend to be 2 or 3 weeks out on scheduling. It's just how it is. And you've gotten all that data within the week to figure out, holy cow, we have an amazing case. We need to do things. It helps you process it quicker, helps you make sure you got it because it's easier to schedule. You got it for cheaper, so you know exactly what it is. And they can take the data right from there and run with it. It is very, very easy because it is the same thing. And if there's ever any questions to it, if there's anything like that, we are absolutely certified for everything we download. We were actually started and owned by a couple of accident reconstruction experts who had a lot of people asking for, hey, why is the download costing us $7,000? We don't even know what's going on with the case.
And it's also a great way to preserve your data before it just gets lost, because like if your car was totaled and it was sitting on an impound lot and it got sold, well, by the time the accident recon guys were able to get to it, it could be on a ship to China to be sold for parts or whatever the case may be. Or with this tractor trailers, like if that truck was still operable, that trucking company is going to want to get that vehicle back up and running as soon as they can, because time is money for them. And if it's having to sit there for a few weeks, they may just say, well, we're just going to start operating it again. So this is just we're trying to make an affordable way to preserve your data as well before it's gone.
Hey,
I hope
thank
that answers
you.
your question.
No, it does. Thank you.
Another question.
Yes.
So you know when you turn on your vehicle, like I drive a Nissan, I drive a Infiniti SUV. So when it turns on, you turn on your vehicle, you get this little blurb on there saying, do you want us to record something that's saying, is this what we're talking about, the EDR data and all of that information? So if I say yes, I want it to record, then it's recording everything that I'm possibly doing when I drive that vehicle?
So that is going to differ by the manufacturer. Most of the time when you have a vehicle that gives you a screen like that, assuming it's not a Toyota or not like a Ford Sync system, most of the time what they're actually doing with that data is taking it's background recording your driving habits, you're connected, it's going to read your Spotify or whatever you're doing. It's not going to make that reportable. We can't really access that in most vehicles unless you get an infotainment supported one. They're actually taking that data and using it there's some companies that will actually kind of sell that data off so it's tied to your phone. So you know how you get targeted ads. That's becoming more and more common with vehicles to take that data and tailor ads to you, and they can make money off of it. Or it's crafting it so that it knows when you get in your car, you always listen to Spotify. So even if you don't have the app open, when you get in and it connects, it's going to kind of auto start that or auto play. We've all gotten in our vehicle, had it connect the phone, then all of a sudden your music starts playing. A lot of times it's doing things like that, but it is also collecting some data to send off. In most vehicles, it's not actually something that can be retrieved. That infotainment data we talked about is really specific to Ford, Lincoln, some GMs, some Nissans, but not all Nissans by a long shot. So that's more of tailoring the vehicle to you or getting your driving preferences sent to Nissan. It's not necessarily recording anything that we could use in a for an accident case.
I always wondered about that, and I wanted to ask Morgan about it when I saw her. So I'm glad you guys came on, because I'm like, do I really need to say yes to this thing, or do I just like ignore it and keep going?
Yeah, I don't send mine into Ford when it asks me things like that. I'm not saying it would have anything, necessarily harmful to you, but if that data's not helping me being reported, I tend to not.
Okay.
Y'all can make your own decisions on it, but kind of like declining cookies on a website. I don't really know what
Got
you're doing with it. Why would I do that?
I just thought I was obligated to do it, but now that I know that I'm not, I'm gonna say no. Thank you.
I have a question as well.
Yes, ma'am.
If you have an accident where a train hits your client's vehicle,
Mhm.
can you all do the black boxes for the train as well?
So trains are a completely different animal. Trains are actually recording a good bit of data, but they do not have the short answer is no. But the long answer is I would send a spoliation request to the train company, because any modern train has got GPS functionality, it's got recording functionality, it's got all these things. We don't delve into that side of it, but the company in their cloud has every piece of data coming off of a train as far as its speed and location at all times. That is something you can access, but it's not something accessible necessarily from an on-site standpoint. I would 100% send them a spoliation letter and request any data related to the train. But no, we do not go out and get it from trains, because they do not have the same kind of black boxes and things we've talked about. Their data probably looks similar to the fleet tracking we talked about for the trucks, but the trains essentially receive almost no damage unless they're hitting a just catastrophically large vehicle. The trains are generally fine, and all that data is stored in their cloud system.
Thank you.
Yes.
Okay. That was going to be one of my questions too, is that if your data retrieval was primarily situated to cars and trucks, or did
Yes.
you do it for like boats and all that other stuff?
So interestingly, we are almost entirely passenger and then commercial vehicles, like the big trucks. We have actually done a few boats, believe it or not. But what we're doing with those is we're actually going in and plugging into the GPS system. So a lot of boats run a Garmin GPS. So we have actually done a few boats. It's nowhere near as common. If it's got a GPS system in it, we kind of can. All of our cars say black box retrieval on the sides. And so we get asked at the gas station all the time, oh, is there a plane wreck? Because everyone hears black box, they think of planes. There's not enough planes getting in wrecks for us to make a business out of the fractional cost we charge, thankfully. But yeah, it is mostly focused on that. If you do have a boat case where there's potentially GPS in it, we can do that. But that's like a once a year deal for us company wide. We do about 2,500 to 3,000 cases a year across the Southeast. And we get maybe one boat a year.
Okay. All right. I did
Now,
have a Go ahead.
I was going to say something we didn't include here is there are some motorcycles that do record some EDR data.
Oh.
Hondas, Kawasaki's, Harley Davidson's. It's nowhere near as standardized as the other data. But if you ever have a motorcycle case that looks, like you might want to know something about the motorcycle, take the VIN of that motorcycle from your accident report, send an email to one of us, and we can actually give you a good idea if that vehicle potentially has any data that might be useful. We've got over 10,000 vehicles in our downloaded inventory. So there's a good chance if you have a case with questions, we've probably downloaded that same year, make, and model of a vehicle. And I can go look through our old reports and tell you exactly what we got the last time we looked at that vehicle, even if it's kind of a niche deal. We do a few Can-Am, like side-by-side UTVs. Some of them are supported for some data. Some of them aren't. It's dependent. Those are better vehicles to just, hey, send me a VIN, make and model, and we can look into if there's anything that might be beneficial for you. But again, it's kind of a crapshoot on those.
Gotcha.
We need a VIN to look at it specifically because there's no standardization on that side.
Okay. All right. And I did have a question in the chat box by P. Smith. She says, what does collision data do when they read the EDR download, but the readout is blank? Do you recommend the black box be sent to another entity like Continental?
Okay, good question. So there are a few vehicles in the infancy of black box data. There's a few Fords in like the 05 range, and those Fords had their black box is made by Continental. We have had a few cases where it doesn't read out, even though it should be supported. It should be, things like that. We do deal with it. It's not super common, but yes, you can send that box into Continental. It will be a while before they download it. But if it's not capable because it had an issue, even though it's supposed to be supported, we can help facilitate getting that box sent over to the manufacturer. This is not a common circumstance, but it does happen every now and then where there is a complete and total issue with the box or the manufacturing side. So yes, we've sent boxes to Continental and a few to like Nissan and things for them to look at and review. Just don't expect them to get to it quickly. But yes, we can help you facilitate that. If we don't get a download, we can recommend that. Absolutely.
All right. Thank you so much. Does anyone have any other questions? Feel free to unmute and ask your question. And I have posted the code for today's CLE in the chat box. Today's code is vehicles. So if you email me that code and request a CLE certificate, I will provide it. Thank you so much, Morgan and Will. We do appreciate you being here today, and the information that you provided, that was excellent. And I see that so many people are posting that same comment in the chat box.
Awesome.
Valuable information. Yes.
We
Thank
love
you
to
for
see it.
having us.
Well, I am working on getting a. I'm gonna take this PowerPoint with the information and get y'all the send it over to y'all so y'all can have it for reference if you'd like it later and things like that. So I'll be sending that over.